Welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. We have a great conversation that is going to take you right into the weekend. I sat down with Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin to talk to him about where the Hunter and Joe Biden investigations go. Where are they now? What do we know? What else do we need to know? How are his colleagues on the Republican side taking this investigation? And here's the bigger question. What happens if we get back in the majority? Where will this go? What does he need to find out what's happening? And is there really a link to Joe Biden? What do we know? What don't we know? What more is to come? But Ron Johnson also got into politics from business. He was a business leader. I want to know from him what his experience is like in the U.S. Senate, number one. Number two, why aren't certain things happening? Why are we not getting rid of certain spending things? Why is change not happening as quick as possible? He is so direct with his answers. It's a breath of fresh air, and I'm excited to bring this conversation to you right now. All right, before we get going, if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and click that notification button as well. Also, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else. It totally helps the show. All right, kick that subscribe button like Chuck Norris would do, by the way. And you know Chuck Norris, right? I mean, he is not just an action star. He's a veteran. He's a family man. But, you know, it takes 2 seconds to look at the guy and realize he's big on health and fitness. You know what? He's 83 years old. The guy looks amazing. Why? Because he put together an amazing formula called Morning Kick. It's got probiotics. Those help you lose weight. Prebiotics, they help you digest things. And then he's got a bunch of superfoods mixed in that helps the muscles and joints. And I'm not even close to 83, and I need every one of these things because I feel like when I wake up in the morning that I'm a little rusty. That's why my Morning Kick makes Chuck Norris look like he's 40 at 83. It gives you more energy, better digestion, clearer thinking. Those are things you need in the morning, in the afternoon, in the day. I need them right now. That's why I advise you to go over to Chuck's website, mymorningkick.com/Sean Spicer. That is mymorningkick.com, Sean Spicer. We might not all look like Chuck Norris eventually or be as healthy as him, but my goodness, the way I feel after a long week here in Milwaukee, I need mymorningkick.com/Sean Spicer to feel as good to go into the weekend. Senator Johnson, I want to, first of all, thanks for being here. Thanks for welcoming us to Milwaukee. I want to start in a little backwards way because I know there's a lot going on in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin, but I don't think that we would know what we know about Hunter Biden and his business dealings. It wasn't if you weren't dogged in your pursuit of these documents. And I don't think that's an understatement by any means, because it seems like since the laptop discovery, there's been one roadblock after another of don't look here. This is disinformation. 51 intelligence agencies telling us it's Russian disinformation. How much more is there, I guess, to what Hunter Biden has been doing that we don't know yet?
Well, first of all, the roadblock started way before the roadblock on the laptop. The FBI took possession of Hunter Biden's laptop in, December 2019? That's right when Senator Grassley and I were ramping up our investigation. Throughout our investigation, our ranking members, Democrat senators, were accusing us of soliciting and disseminating Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
The press picked up on that. And so that was the entire theme. Then, in August of 2020, both Senator Grassley and I get an unsolicited briefing by the FBI where they're basically telling us, you're targeting Russian disinformation. And it's like, okay, we've been accused of this for months now. Do you have more information? Nothing we can share. So at that point in my briefing, there were separate briefings, I started asking, who directed you to brief us? Who did that? Sean, 3 years later, I've asked Christopher Wray in open hearing, who directed that briefing? They won't tell us. They'll say, it's interagency process. Well, there are people in the interagency. So basically, I view that as an operation directed by the FBI, intelligence agencies, against Senator Grassley and I to marginalize our report, which we dropped before the Hunter Biden laptop. Actually, we were offered that laptop the day after our report dropped because Mr. McIsaac finally decided that he would be safe enough to go public with it if the U.S. senators were looking into this thing. So there's a story that has not been told about this, the corruption of federal law enforcement. But again, Senator Grassley and I pretty well laid out the foundational evidence. I mean, more than enough evidence to, I think, convince people, certainly me, Joe Biden never should have been president. Now we're filling in the details. So we're getting more pieces of the puzzle. But it's been obvious to me, and I think it's been obvious to anybody paying attention, that Joe Biden has been corrupt. He's been lying to the American public since he plagiarized the British politician back in his first presidential run.
I want to back into this for a second, because I want to get to the Biden piece. But I think what's so funny is as you're telling this story, I'm flashing back to like right after Trump wins. We have this briefing about what was supposed to be an intel briefing. All these guys in the room. I had a security briefing, a security clearance at the time, so I was one of the few people who actually got to sit in it. I watched Comey at the end pull Trump aside and said, I got to tell you something. They didn't have the Steele dossier at the time, blah, 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 blah. And then getting told by reporters and I was like, I was not only in the meeting, I was part of it. It was amazing, the misinformation, but the reason I'm bringing this up is it was the FBI briefing the president-elect about an uncorroborated bunch of allegations. The first thing I did, I'm not law enforcement, I'm not an investigator. I remember when BuzzFeed calls and says, hey, and CNN, here's this dossier. And I said, well, one of the allegations was Michael Cohen had been to Prague during this time. I called Cohen, and I said, do you have your passport? He said he did. We looked through it. Cohen had never exited the country nor re-entered in a time frame close to that. And I thought to myself, okay, here right off the bat is something that I can find that doesn't jive. Wouldn't that have caused a bunch of FBI agents to say, yeah, but this is what blows my mind is I keep thinking, I'm not law enforcement, I'm not a trained investigator, you're a businessman, and you and I are sitting here going, how did the FBI miss this? How did they do this?
Because, Sean, they were corrupt. Understand. John Brennan, who through intel sources found out that Hillary Clinton was going to hatch a scheme to accuse the Trump campaign, including with Russia, he briefed Vice President Biden and Barack Obama, I think it was in August of 2016. Let's face it, intelligence, that group of people took out Michael Flynn. He would be way too dangerous as Director of National Intelligence, so they took him out. That was an FBI sting operation basically on Michael Flynn. They knew all this. They knew the Steele dossier's source was somebody they were investigating as a Russian spy. They knew all of this, and yet they proceeded with the false narrative that they knew that Hillary Clinton came up with. By the way, it all dates back to the hacking of the DNC server. I have not seen solid evidence that was actually hacked by Russia. The emails themselves are incredibly damaging to certain members of the Democrat Party. So I think they had to come up with a diversionary tactic. Hey, let's say this was hacked by Russia. Let's direct and they've been doing that now for year after year after year against Senator Grassley and myself, against President Trump. That's been their canard. Let's say Russia has interfered in these things and will distract the American public from our wrongdoing. That's
what blows my mind, is that when I have these discussions with people and they go, oh, Russia and the Steele dossier, and I'll give them the example I just gave to you. Do you guys realize that, like me, not the intelligence, I said, gosh, here's why this doesn't make sense. And everyone said, you know what the funny thing is? The reply I got was, I said, hey, look, here's Michael Cohen's passport. He's willing to show you that this doesn't happen. Therefore, this calls into credibility. They go, yeah, but what about the next thing? Now, normally somebody comes to you and says, hey, I just figured out this problem and here are the 4 things. And you go, but 1 and 2 don't make sense or that doesn't work. They don't turn around and go, well, let's try 3 and 4. You go, clearly you didn't do your homework. You don't know what's going on. And yet the media and the government, despite these continued instances of this, just press forward as if, okay, forget that, let's move on. It is, and your point about the American people.
We're up against powerful forces. Shifting a little bit different subject, COVID. I call it the COVID Cartel.
And you were out there on that.
The Biden administration, the federal health agencies who've been captured by Big Pharma. Big Pharma has also captured the media. That's why they spend billions of dollars on ads saying that this drug may kill you. It makes no sense other than for them to control the narrative, and plus the big tech social media giants. So that is the COVID cartel. They have been spectacularly wrong on their response to COVID. It is a miserable failure, but the body count is way too high that they can't afford to be proven wrong, and they have the power to make sure you can't prove them wrong. And the same thing is true of the whole Russian collusion hoax. They were spectacularly wrong. They've been proven wrong. They'll just never admit it. And they have the power to pretty well sweep it under the rug. That's what they're doing.
Before I forget this, I do want to go back to Hunter, because what you're talking about gets to something I want to get to in a second in terms of how you transition to government, what you think. But I want to get back to the Hunter Biden thing for one thing, because I've said this over and over again. We're a big country. There's a lot of dirtballs, unfortunately. Hunter Biden is one of those. Being a dirtball isn't illegal. But the connection, and what I've said about Republicans' efforts is it goes back to what you were saying. Connecting this to Joe Biden. If he, as the president, did things, we know that he's misled us already. I knew nothing of my son's business dealings. If this was Donald Trump, people would be going nuts and saying, you lied again, you did know, this is a cover-up. I'm sure that the Russians through the Seychelles are connected to some Syrians. They'd be making a million connections. Now they've shifted and said, what's the new line is, I wasn't directly involved.
Or there's no proof that I was directly,
but what do you know? Because I think at the end of the day, again, Hunter Biden can be a scumbag, a dirtball, an influence peddler. He can even be a criminal. But the bigger point to me is how this relates to the President of the United States and maybe decisions and policies that he influenced. What is your understanding of that relationship right now? What do we need to know as Americans?
So first of all, the mainstream media will never have enough evidence to report on this honestly. But just open up your eyes. This is so obvious. Okay, so we obviously know, and this has been proven, Hunter Biden even admits it, made millions of dollars, didn't report it. That's called tax evasion.
Yes.
You know, we have emails where
I think, and I don't want to speak for your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but I believe Democrats are big into taxing the rich and paying their fair share.
Right,
isn't that?
right.
I've heard that.
Wealthy tax cheats. Well, we've got a perfect example on the son of the President of the United States, and probably the President of the United States himself, okay? So again, it's obvious these evaded taxes, that's a crime, okay? It's obvious that Hunter Biden had no skill that he's being compensated millions of dollars for. I mean, again, I'm a business guy. You got to provide some value for somebody to turn over $1 million to you, multiple millions of dollars. So the only thing Hunter Biden was selling was access to his dad.
Right.
And his dad obviously knew about it. It's a conflict of interest. He's selling America down the road to our adversaries. All these things are obvious. The reason I sound so frustrated, it's been obvious to me for years. It's been obvious to anybody who's willing to be unbiased and open their eyes. But the problem is we have the corrupt and complicit media. We don't have journalists anymore.
Right.
We have advocates for the left. They're the ones that ushered Biden into office, a candidate that campaigned from his basement. They made him president. They're going to cover up all of his horrible policies that are weakening this country, destroying this country, open borders, 40-year high inflation, a war on fossil fuels, record gasoline prices, the embarrassing and dangerous surrender in Afghanistan. That list of horribles, they don't report on it. They don't cover it up. I mean, 5 million people coming into this country illegally.
I think
Not
about
a problem,
the interview that he did with Axios, Mike Allen of Axios. And he accuses Mike Allen of pushing. And he says, you know, you guys always bring this up because Mike Allen is talking about Hunter's influence peddling and said, didn't you think you should have known more? And he brings up China. And he says, my son has never taken any money from China. To your point, that's a fact. That's not disputable.
Lie.
Not disputable. Okay, so number one, we know that. Think about this for a second. Imagine living in darkness. That's what would happen if our power grid took a big hit, and it's more vulnerable than ever. I mean, over the last 18 months, it's been hit several times. And if a blackout occurred, we're not talking just hours, right? Without power, it could be days, weeks, or even months. So you know how bad that would be at night, no power, you couldn't see. Okay, but think about all the things that we charge every day. Our phones, medical devices that are key to ourselves, maybe an infant, maybe to an older family member or friend. I don't know, but I mean, all those things. And then our food, our refrigerators, they would all need to be powered up. That's why having your own power supply is more important than ever before. And with Patriot Power Generator, you would get a solar generator that you could take with you. It's portable. You could bring it into your house. It's enough energy to take care of all those, the phones, the medical devices, even the refrigerators. So go to 4patriots.com. Use code SPICER to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store. They also guarantee it for an entire year, plus free shipping if you spend more than $97. And they take care of charities that support our veterans and families through every purchase. Go to 4patriots, the number 4, patriots.com. Use your code SPICER to get 10% off. But here's the other question. Under the Trump administration, people like Paul Manafort and others were charged with violating the Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA, right? Which means you have to register with the Department of Justice if you're going to do another country's bidding or a state-owned company, right? And in China, everything's a state-owned company, meaning, so if you're going to come in and represent a company, and we know that that company's controlled by the government, you still have to register with. Where is the call? We've heard about the gun charge. Again, I'm so shocked that Democrats aren't concerned about a guy lying on a gun form to get a gun that got thrown into a trash bin by a school, but we'll leave that aside, or paying taxes. Where's the concern about FARA? It was such a big deal under Trump with Paul Manafort and all these other folks that were lobbying the Trump administration and not properly filing. They went to jail. We're not even talking about that in this set of charges that Hunter Biden's trying to deal on. No one's bringing up FARA.
Well, it's a big deal for a Republican, is violating FARA, but obviously not for a Democrat. Here's another thing. Where is all the outrage that the son of the President of the United States spent tens of thousands of dollars procuring, using and abusing women who were trafficked through an international sex trafficking ring?
That's actually.
And we got. I mean, it's like,
I'm glad you brought that up, because
that is so vile. That is so grotesque, and yet I guess it's okay because Hunter Biden did it. You think those women were just in love with Hunter Biden?
You know what the funny thing is? I got to tell you, see, this is why I love these discussions, because it's funny. I know Hunter got kicked out of the military, but in the military, if you go into some of these places where they're usually the origins of them, the nexus is some kind of sex trafficking ring, and so they're basically say
these women aren't doing it voluntarily.
Right.
There's something they're being held hostage on.
And no one on the right, no one on the left shares a concern about that. I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we focus on the gun and on the tax charges, rightly so. But where are the women who talk about defending women and protecting women and ensuring, again, the same people?
And that may be the most grotesque violation. I mean, how would you like that to be your daughter, who got kidnapped or whatever, or through drug addiction or whatever, gets caught up in this sex trafficking ring and being forced to offer her body to Hunter Biden because he's paying the sex traffickers thousands of dollars? How would you think if that was your daughter? I know how I would think, but the media again just blows it off. It's like it's not even a crime, not even a moral crime to them, apparently.
Let me pivot from the media, though. One of your colleagues, you mentioned you and Senator Grassley. Senator Grassley's been there quite some time, chairman of the Finance Committee previously. I mean, he's, okay, you guys seem to see eye and eye on this, right? I mean, when you go talk to colleagues of yours, rank and file, Republicans, let's start with the Republicans, and say, here's what Hunter Biden did, taxes, guns, here's what we have about Joe. What is the response?
Well, now there may be a little interested, but back when Senator Grassley and I were doing this, we were persona non grata. I mean, it was too political. Listen, my colleague, let's face it, too many Republicans are afraid of the media.
Yeah.
And that's going to be politicized. I mean, let's face it, Mitt Romney, in my committee, I'm chairman of Homeland Security, he accused me in committee, in public hearing, of misusing committee resources doing this investigation. So this was way too political. No, I was concerned about conflict of interest that could compromise American national security. But that was the lack of support we had. I didn't have support from our Republican Senate leadership.
Right.
I didn't have the votes I needed to subpoena. Had we been able to subpoena? But again, all this was unfolding. We were also doing our investigation during COVID. We had many restraints. It's actually amazing. We got a report out as detailed and as verifiably true. There's not been one thing that Senator Grassley put in our report that's ever been
don't you think
determined
that's
as not accurate.
I point to the laptop as another example of that. It started as Russian disinformation. You point to COVID stuff. And I turn back to people and I say, oh, so tell me one piece of this, kind of the opposite of my Michael Cohen example. When I was going after the Steele dossier, I said, here's why this isn't true. Here's why this person wasn't there. That's under my blah, blah, blah. Here's the source of this. And yet it was like, we still got to believe it. The opposite is true whether it's COVID or Hunter Biden, where it's like every piece of evidence that comes out never gets refuted. No one says, well, that study wasn't true, or Hunter actually didn't do that, or that text wasn't accurate. And yet it doesn't do anything to strengthen the narrative. But the thing, I want to stick on your colleagues for a second, because I get the sense, as long as I've been doing this, that the second that Democrats go after Trump, and that was the most thing, Republicans felt like they had to jump on the bandwagon. I support a special counsel. We need to get to the bottom of this. It's right that. And when their side does something, they all cower. Oh, yeah. No, so afraid of.
But again, they have the mainstream media in their back pocket.
No,
but
do they?
I mean, it's a significant difference.
No,
I mean,
the
it just
Dems
is.
do. But here's my problem with most Republicans these days. I think that they think that if I say these things, that they'll be my friend.
They'll be nice. No, it's delusional from that standpoint. But also, it just keeps the press off their backs. They're not going to be attacked.
Listen, that day.
You know, my colleagues look at me as roadkill, probably, right? I mean, as much as I've been attacked and
the
vilified.
thing that I find interesting about roadkill is that you keep winning. You beat Russ Feingold. You beat him again. You beat the lieutenant governor. Then my point is, at some point, go, hey, Ron Johnson took on
Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, won. And
that's because voters actually do want to see somebody who's genuine.
Correct.
They may not agree with the person,
but my point is,
that guy actually believes what he's saying. Whether I agree
he'll
with it or
fight
not,
for it.
genuine.
But these guys, I look at that. Most politicians that I've come across tend to kind of do a little of this, right? And if my view is, look what he's doing, and it's working, at the very least,
That's because most people want to get reelected. That's not my motivation.
I know, but
not
you did.
at all.
I know it's not.
In fact, I'd much rather go home.
Right.
Okay.
But the point is that you got in. I think you announced kind of late,
real late.
Real late, but you still won. And my point is that for these guys who still want to get reelected, I go, hey, you can have backbone and win.
Well, listen, it's about truth. I think people, in the end, have a pretty good feeling, pretty good barometers in terms of this sounds true, or at least this sounds genuine.
Right.
You know, again, whether I agree or disagree with the guy truly believes that. He's not just pounding sand. He's not, saying what he thinks I want to hear. He's saying what he believes. And I think that,
how many people are like that? I mean,
people.
look, I'm not going to get into names because I know it's a small body there. How many people of the other 99 do you think share that quality?
There are a lot of good people. No, this is not.
I know.
No,
that's why I'm not asking for names.
There are a lot of good people serving in Congress.
Right.
Truthfully, I mean, people want. They're concerned about this country. They love this country. They're concerned about the communities, their constituents they represent and stuff. But it's so easy to rationalize it. But I have to get reelected.
I get it. No.
And so,
but that's what I'm saying.
I think that just totally kind of corrupts the whole thought process, where all of a sudden they're part of the uniparty and they're voting for all this spending, and hey, there's always a way to rationalize to vote for something, right?
I get it, but there's a difference. I'm not impugning anybody saying they're bad people, right? I get it. I know a lot of these.
I'm a pretty unique animal.
Okay, so how many animals are like you?
Not many.
Not many. Okay, how important is getting back in the majority for you?
I mean, crucial for me.
Crucial.
Yeah, I mean, then I become chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee Investigation. I was chairman of Homeland Security, the overall committee, the full committee under which the subcommittee exists, but I didn't have the same subpoena power as the chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee Investigations. I had to go get votes.
Right.
I couldn't unilaterally issue a subpoena. I get that chairmanship of that subcommittee, and these are ongoing investigations, and I'll be able to subpoena people.
That's got to be a pretty scary proposition in Washington, D.C.
Let me tell you the challenge we have, though, okay? First of all, I had my budget cut by my Republican colleague. When I was chairman of the committee, the fellow who was the chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee, I gave him $1 million based on my budget. He got the same budget as I got, cut my budget to about $750,000. It didn't get increased with the new ranking member. So now, as the ranking member of Permanent Subcommittee Investigation, you know how many investigators I have, how many staff members I have? The agencies have tens of thousands of people, right?
3.
I've got 5.
Oh, more than I thought.
I mean, we're kind of outmanned, aren't we?
Well, that's why
it's kind of hard when you see all the corruption in all these agencies. We got 5 people. Really, congressional oversight is pretty well atrophied. It's died on the vine, okay? And the administration has no respect
for
congressional oversight. Right. I mean, they just give you the middle finger.
We've seen this in this Hunter Biden thing that there's, or even there's a big difference between what Congress can find and what the investigators can find. So let me ask you this: if you were to take back the majority, what's the appetite among your colleagues? Is it going to be the same again, where it's going to go, Ron Johnson, please don't do this to us. Like, let's go cut a tax.
Oh, there'll always be that concern. Again, they see how I've been treating the media. I'm sure many of them would be a little concerned that I would use that power and I'd get into these investigations that might be considered too political.
Yeah.
And we've got to work for the American people, and we do. But you're not going to solve these problems with this level of corruption throughout government. And
But how do we, for the average, I mean, I talk to so many folks, and they'll say, I don't even want to vote anymore. I'm tired of the process. I'm throwing my hands up. And my answer is, okay, but if we don't, look what's happened in 2.5 years. If we, I get it. So like,
but the solution isn't to fix government because it's unfixable. The solution is to limit it and shrink its size.
Okay.
I mean, you've got, when we were debating the omnibus at the end of last year, right? I asked my colleagues. I said, anybody know how much in total the federal government spent? And I didn't get any answers.
No.
So then I went out to the media. We held a press conference, and I asked the media, these folks that cover Washington, right? Said, any of you guys know how much the federal government spent? The largest financial entity in the world. I think one of the reports, well, it's over $1 trillion. No, that's discretionary spending. I mean, total spending. Right. Nobody knew. And the answer is $6.2 trillion. In the first 10 months of this fiscal year, our deficit was $1.62 trillion.
There you go with those facts.
Okay. Well, again, it's massive.
Doesn't that say something that your colleagues don't even know how much we're? I mean,
so my primary mission, I want to uncover the truth, and I want to expose it. My primary mission is to wean as many Americans, as many Wisconsinites, off of big government as possible. You quit looking at the federal government to solve your problems. It's incapable of solving problems. It exacerbates problems. It causes problems. It's mortgaging our children's future. Now, again, unfortunately, that's a minority view because you go to Washington as a legislator, what do?
Bring stuff
you
back.
legislate. I mean, from my standpoint, if we never passed another law in Washington, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. So much of these laws are just BS. They just spend more money. They just mortgage our kids' future further.
I love this conversation with Ron Johnson. I'm going to continue in just a second, but I want to tell you about an important organization. If you're an animal lover, you want to know about Delta Rescue. They save animals that are lost in the wilderness, that have no home, dogs, cats, horses, you name it. I mean, you know what happens if you're an abandoned animal, right? It's very sad. Delta Rescue, though, goes in and makes sure that all of these animals are part of a Care for Life animal sanctuary, and it's the largest one in the world. Again, it's a Care for Life one. It's no kill. It's a super sanctuary where these guys, these animals that are rescued are protected. They're played, they're loved for, they get nutrition, they get veterinary care, all that kind of stuff so that they can continue to enjoy life as an animal, play out peacefully and happily. But the thing is, Delta Rescue relies completely on animal lovers like me and you who give them a contribution, right? And they need our help right now to continue to perform this great work. No contribution, by the way, is too small for them. Every dollar helps feed an animal, protect an animal, get them the care that they need. They'll send you a monthly newsletter to make sure that you know all the great work that they're doing. So please go to deltarescue.org. They can answer questions if you have them, but you're not going to regret doing this if you're an animal lover. Go to deltarescue.org. So if we take back the Senate, and I think there's a decent chance of doing that, and you become chairman, do we need the same leadership? Do we need a change in leadership in the Senate?
I think it's going to be time,
Yeah.
But we need leadership that's dedicated to a different form of governance.
Yep.
We need those of us.
Would you ever want to do that?
Not really.
Not really.
No.
I mean, I think that herding cats has got to be a really difficult thing to begin with.
I would be happy to be the chairman of the permanent subcommittee of investigation and uncover and expose the truth. That'd be a good role for me to play, as well as speak my mind.
Out there, right?
We need, again. How many interviews do you have like this?
Not many.
I mean, there are many members of Congress and Senate that'll look in the camera and say, it's completely broken. You're not going to fix it. So start limiting its growth. Start transferring the governing authority back to the states, where that was the vision of our founding fathers. That's the 10th Amendment. Governing close to the governed, where it's more accountable, more efficient, more effective. We've turned that foundation premise on its head, and it ain't working.
So you're a business guy. You ran a company. You go to Washington, and just walk me through, like, what are your impressions of, like?
Yeah, well, first of all, I knew it was dysfunctional.
Right.
I've been amazed at really how dysfunctional it truly is. What a charade it is. Again, we're debating all these bills. We're not debating bills. There's a bill that's written by somebody.
Right.
Staff members, working with the people they're going to eventually go work for. They come up with these 2,000-page bills. They get dropped on our desk. We're all of a sudden voting on this stuff. You have to have your amendments in on this 2,000-page bill by close of business today. It's impossible. So again, it's so completely.
Do you think it's that way?
Let me say,
but that's
half-assed. Okay.
Right, but is it half-assed or is it intentional?
Well, I think both. I mean, It's just so massive.
You can't read it, pass it.
And again, we're only passing these bills on about a third, 30% of the budget or less. Everything else is on automatic pilot. Haven't been passed
Medicare,
previously.
Medicaid, VA.
Things like Social Security. Now, Social Security, paternalistic, fine. People weren't saving for retirement, so you force people to save. The problem is, you extract the money from their wages, and then government didn't save it.
Correct.
They spent the money, it's gone. The trust fund
there's an IOU in the trust fund.
The trust fund is simply an accounting
gimmick.
Because a U.S. government bond held in the hands of the U.S. government is worthless. It's like if you have a piece of paper, write $20, stick it in your pocket and say, I got $20. No, you don't.
You have a note.
It's that promissory note, okay? So when that fiction runs out, now benefits are going to have to be reduced to the level of revenue, which is about 75, 80% right now. And the question is, are we going to have the financial wherewithal to plus up benefits? I've done the spreadsheet, I'm an accountant, right? Had we actually invested that in something like a Dow Jones Index Fund, which we didn't have back then, but if we just invest that in like real assets outside the federal government, we'd have something like $7 to $8 trillion in hard assets that the federal government could cash in and pay off the benefits. We'd probably be arguing more about how to increase Social Security benefits than what are we going to do in 10 years. But it's so dishonest. They're very, first of all, I don't know how many members actually understand all these things, okay? They're certainly not going to talk honestly about it to people. I'm one of the few that's willing to just tell people the brutal truth, which is why when I give speeches, and if I'm not introduced this way, I always warn people I'm not the most uplifting character.
But the thing that I find interesting is that all these guys, I've run campaigns for 30 years. I did my first one in '94.
But you're part of the problem then.
Yeah, well, but again, it goes back to why I think a lot of people go in with the right motives, right? But they say, we got to cut this, we got to cut that, and yet we get to a point where you're going, why do you? It's funny when we see the debt ceiling, right? And everyone says you have to pass the debt ceiling. There'll be economic calamity if we don't, and here are all the consequences. Okay, I get that. And then the answer is, we'll deal with the budget and appropriation stuff after. Just raise the debt ceiling, we deal with it. And then what happens? Everyone goes home. No one deals with it. Why? I just don't. The one thing that should unite every Republican, there's a bunch of things where you can get some is fiscal discipline and the size of government. And it blows my mind that the one thing that, to your point,
but Sean, because the public likes the free money.
They like the free money.
There's not a demand on the part of the public for fiscal discipline, for cutting benefits, cutting spending.
I get it.
So it really is. It's in the end.
Because you come home and your campaign is, I got you that bridge, I got you that. Yeah. Now, guess what I cut from you? But I look at things, and this is just my pet peeve. Why, with a House, the Constitution says that spending needs to start in the House. Republicans control the House. Why aren't they at least doing the low-hanging fruit? Why isn't PBS getting cut? Why isn't NPR getting cut? Those are things that every Republican should say, this is an absolute waste. Right now, you can go
deliver that to the Senate and dare them to toss it back up.
But these are things, this is such a stupid, yes, someone would say to me, Sean, oh, that's $500,000 or $2.6 million. I get it. You're not solving the deficit. But we don't even try the low-hanging fruit.
Well, listen, I was part of the small group of conservative senators working with the House Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
And let's face it, it was the House Freedom Caucus that came up with the proposal on the whole debt ceiling, right? I mean, they're the ones that, and then they were very compromising with the rest of the conference to actually pass that to give Speaker McCarthy some leverage. But again, their deal was, this is a spending package to increase the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion. The Speaker, without telling anybody, didn't do a deal on $1.5 trillion in debt ceiling increase. What he did is he suspended it till 2025, and that's probably an increase of about $4 trillion. The Freedom Caucus members weren't happy.
Right.
I wasn't happy. So we finally had given the Speaker some leverage to negotiate something with the Senate and with Biden. And I mean, the leverage was the $1.5 trillion. Now, you could have said, okay, we'll go $2 trillion. But to just suspend it, it's like that took all the wind out of everybody's sails, So again, but that's what happened. That was the very sad reality.
What I don't get is so what's the answer, right? So one of the things that I look back in the contract with America, and one of the things that Newt Gingrich did when he was campaigning for Speaker, it was his joke, right? Now, he was the minority leader, the minority whip actually, and he said, "I'm running for Speaker." And the idea was, everyone said, "Sure, if we get elected, we haven't been in the majority in like 80 years. If we win, sure, you can be Speaker." But he carried around an ice bucket. And the ice bucket was endemic of a problem that had existed in Congress for decades, which was that back before electricity, they would bring a bucket of ice and put it in front of every member's office, right? And you would, that then we actually got refrigerators, but no one stopped delivering ice. And it was like a couple $100,000 a year because some dude got paid to drop off ice every day.
Right.
I mean, it was like probably like 4 dudes who got paid, and their dad's uncles were contributors or something, and knew it was like, this is stupid. But this is part of the problem. If we don't do the nickels and the dimes, I feel like at that point people got it. They visualized it. Americans started to say, you know what? You respect our money. You respect what you're doing. I brought this up to Kevin McCarthy at one point prior to him rolling out the plan that he had before the last election. I said, where's the visual again? Where's the, we get it, we're driving, government cars need to get reined in, or something that shows, and I just don't feel like the party. And you're the business guy.
So the beginning of the solution, I actually wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal the day after I got elected, saying what we need to do is, use the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
And use the debt ceiling to provide us some leverage for future spending fights, okay? And one of them would be End Government Shutdown Act. We always get slaughtered in that, so let's not threaten government shutdowns, let's end them. Okay, if you can't get your act together, you don't have appropriation bills, you don't shut the government down, you just spend at last year's levels. That gives us leverage. The No Default Act, which prioritizes spending. So there's no talk, by the way, we'll never default on our debt.
Right.
We have more than enough revenue to service our debt. So we'll never default on it. It's just a quasi-default where we're not paying off all our suppliers. Well, listen, if you're a supplier of the federal government, you're supplying a bankrupt entity, you ought to be cautious. I mean, in the private sector, those suppliers, if they're dealing with a bankrupt entity, they get a haircut, right? So you have to give that you have to obtain leverage, recognizing that Republicans will never win a shutdown battle, will never win a debt ceiling battle. So create leverage around those points. And that's what, again, was so disappointing to me is the House Freedom Caucus gave McCarthy leverage. It was we're the only ones that have a solution. We passed an increased debt ceiling, $1.5 trillion. What's your proposal, Democrats?
Right.
But instead of using that leverage effectively, and what I would argue is, no matter what he did under that, he never should have gone off the $1.5 trillion because the debt ceiling gives us leverage. We get a little bit this time, we get a little bit next time.
Right.
First of all, we've never yet had a legitimate vote on preventing Government Shutdown Act. That's a bill I passed through my committee twice. It was a bipartisan bill between Maggie Hassan and James Langford. It just does what I just suggested. Just don't shut the government down, spend at last year's levels. Who would vote against that? Now, if they did,
but here,
but why don't we ever give it a decent vote? Why don't we use that as leverage?
Exactly. So that's my answer. Why?
Because the uniparty likes to spend money. That's the bottom line. I mean, it's a sad fact. It is the uniparty. Sean, I still view myself more Tea Party than Republican.
Right.
I mean, I sprang out of the Tea Party.
There's 2 pieces that I want to pull on this, because one goes back to the comment that you made a little while ago on COVID. You said Big Pharma. How much outside industry influence guides these decisions, right? In other words, you hear these stories where it's somebody comes in and says, hey, that's great, Senator, but hey, we got a bunch of people in your district and we've been donating, and plus, da-da-da. I mean, how much is that the uniparty, and how much of it is the pressure?
I think the military-industrial complex, the capture, it's a big, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. I mean, all these agencies are captured by the businesses that they regulate, right? But the capture is done more behind the scenes with the bureaucrats. It's, let's face it, government employees get to retire at a pretty early age.
Yeah.
They don't quit working. They go to work for the industries they're regulating. So especially the ones higher at the top, I mean, they're the ones that's making decisions on regulations, that type of thing. You think they're going to, cut themselves off of a big paying job? So I think that's where most of the corruption occurs, is the people inside the agencies that have an idea,
that came from
that
those
have a job offer,
right?
Whether it's the generals going into Lockheed and and those the military contractors, or whether it's Gottlieb going to work for Pfizer, just name them. All these guys.
So what's but that's my question. You have this unique accounting/business background. As somebody who's now been in the system and has fought, what's the answer?
First, expose it. I don't think it's generally known yet. I don't think it's adequately exposed. And again, going up against COVID Cartel, it's really difficult to expose it, but I'm going to keep trying, okay? So you expose what that process is, and then hopefully you can get legislation, but you also have to starve the beast. the overall solution is limit its growth, start shrinking it, start moving the governing authority back to the states.
Do you think there's any hope, like I was saying before, like I think, to use your formula, exposing it, starving it, why can't a group of Republicans think of 5 things that are no-brainers? And again, it's how big is the government? $6 trillion?
We try.
But give me 5 things and say pot plant growing, electric vehicles that are on Mars. I mean, find 5 programs and force everyone to vote and say, you tell me that you're going to tell your constituents this is 1.6 million. Maybe it's something really small, but start the exercise. Because the thing that I find funny, you talk about like a number, right? I always hear, like, without ever knowing, you know how much we need for COVID? $12.6 trillion. How did you come up with that?
Pull out of a hat.
Exactly. I mean, the accountant in you has got to be going.
No, it drives me nuts. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, imagine you putting your mortgage, mortgage payment together, and you go, you know how much we need for the mortgage? $1.6 million, and your spouse would look at you and be like, how is that possible? Well, I came up with a number. You'd be like, no, you can look at the bank statement and see how much to pay.
Sean, this job drives me nuts. I say nobody can out frustrate me. but it's not a boring job, okay?
No.
And I'm hoping it's
sounds like there's a lot to keep.
And there are things you can do, like Rights Try Me. They're accomplishments, okay? And it's so important. I mean, we have to preserve this nation. I mean,
yes.
we are the last best hope. We truly are. And right now, we're circling the drain. I mean, the Democrats have put us on a very dangerous path. I try and remind people that Venezuelans, they voted themselves into poverty. Just took a couple decades.
Right.
We've been voting ourselves into a really dangerous situation right now. We better reverse course pretty quick.
So I remember when I was at the RNC, you used to talk a lot about not just like messaging, how to do that. Do you think, because I think that's half the battle, the exposing it and selling it and telling people, here's why this makes sense, here's the problem, here's, sort of like in addiction, here's what you're doing to yourself.
I've heard a lot of times, why doesn't the Republican Party have a spokesman?
Yes.
Because everybody wants to be the spokesman, okay? And it's hard to herd cats.
I tried that, by the way.
And quite honestly, the media picks the spokesman for you. So I don't get a whole lot of exposure on mainstream media because I'm the counter narrative.
And I get that, but what I'm saying is, what can do? Is this I guess to dial back? Is it a messaging problem? Meaning, if we could get more cohesion, would that help solve it?
Cohesion, strategic planning is always helpful. Talking about amendment votes, when we have these vote-a-ramas and stuff, I mean, leadership does a pretty good job of, okay, let's vote on the border, let's vote on, we try and highlight that, but nobody pays attention to that. People have to realize these are macro issues, and it requires a macro messaging campaign. You can't be
But we're not even trying. I don't feel
part of my problem with my investigations, I mean, you get down to so many details, you start going down to all these rabbit holes. In order to fully understand it, you need to know the details.
Right.
But then at the same time, you got to bring it up to the 30,000-foot level and be able to describe
and sell it.
The corruption and the criminal activity of the Bidens. It's not an easy thing.
So let me ask you, just kind of in closing, what keeps you up at night? What do you think we need? I'm personally I am freaked out about China. I don't think that we take China serious enough as a threat. I think post-COVID, instead of saying, wow, they sent us a disease, did nothing about it, covered up, lied about it, we went, you know what we should do? Let's buy more stuff from them. Let's lean heavily more on them. Let's get our and I keep going to the nut of this conversation. I'm like, they're coming, and our answer is just like, hey, what's on TV?
So to me, you would ask me a couple years ago, what's the greatest threat? I would have said our debt and deficit, okay?
Yep.
And I don't deny the challenge that China is. Right now, I think the greatest threat to this nation is the division. And I try and point out to audiences, we're not a naturally divided country. We're not. Right. America is a great country because Americans are good people. We are being purposefully divided. Biden, 8 times in his inaugural address, said his number one goal is complete. I mean, right. He didn't mean it at all. Obama exacerbated the racial divide. Biden has been exacerbating the divide with identity politics, critical race theory, all this transgender being pushed on our children and stuff. Not that we don't have. Listen, Republicans, we care about everybody. Americans care about people globally. Yeah. We're good people. We need to recognize that this division and hate is being pushed on us.
I get it, and I agree with you.
But
I look at this and I say, as a conservative, a proud conservative, my answer to a lot of liberals is, I don't really care what you want to do. I really don't. If you want to do something in your life that's your business,
live and let live. That's our approach.
Right. But
that's
saying,
not theirs.
No. You must call me he, she, they, them.
Right. I know.
And I'm like, I won't force my religion on you, my opinion.
Right. That's
how
I know. That's the lunacy of liberalism. I can't explain it, but I understand.
That's the division.
Again, recognize what's happening to us. Don't let them divide us. Reach out to your neighbors. I'm being dead serious about this. But somebody's got to be the adult in the room. I'm not sure it's going to work. Listen, I'm not one of these politicians who says I'm an optimist. I'm not. Sorry. I'm a pessimist. Okay. I am highly concerned.
But you're hopeful
that our nation is. I'm not going to give up hope.
Okay.
Not saying that's different than being hopeful. I'm not willing to give up hope. I'm going to fight to the last, and that's what we need more people to do. Open up their eyes. Pull their heads out of, I'll say, the sand.
Yeah.
Okay. Recognize what's happening in this country. This is being done to us.
Yes.
This is, Saul Alinsky's rule for radicals. This is what the left does. They are destructive. Liberalism is not positive. Does not build things. It destroys things. Freedom is our one essential ingredient, but truth is the highest value. People need to understand that, recognize what's being done to us. Don't let it happen.
What a great way to end this, because I think that's the message. I think we got to go out there, and I honestly totally agree with that. I think so much is at stake, and I wish people fully understood, because I think that's the one caveat, is the division is killing us, but I don't think people fully appreciate what you're saying, because we're going to lose the country if we don't actually recognize what's happening.
We share the same goals, right? I mean, as Americans, we just want safety, we want security, we want prosperity, we want to be able to raise our kids the way we want to raise them. That's what most people want. Focus on the areas of agreement. That's how you succeed in the private sector. Unfortunately, in politics, division is a winning formula, and that's sick.
Senator Ron Johnson, thank you for an amazing conversation.
John, real pleasure.
You bet. What a week to kick this show off. It's been amazing here in Milwaukee. What great guests, what great conversations. I love that conversation with Ron Johnson. Thank you for all the support. This has been a big jump for me, right? Going from a daily show into independent media. And what that means is your support is crucial. Thank you for subscribing, for sharing. I've loved the feedback. Some folks are going on Locals, SeanSpicer.locals.com, giving me ideas and feedback. I greatly appreciate it. I thank you for sharing this with your friends and family and coworkers, and also subscribing. This is so important to the work that we do. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. This is what allows this to happen, and to bring guests and to bring you inside politics in a way, as I said, that no one else is doing. I mean, the guests that we're having the conversations are not on other shows for a reason. But I felt it was important to be able to do this because so much is at stake. And we saw that with this debate in Milwaukee. The conversations that we're going to have next week, by the way, are fantastic because there's so many questions. You heard Don Jr. earlier this week. How is this going to affect, what's going to happen? He said it was going to go to the Supreme Court. I don't know, maybe. But this is what the left is planning to do. They're going to use this system. So I think it's important that we understand what's happening, how this will all play out, how much time that we need, et cetera. So thank you for all your support. Thank you for subscribing. Please continue to do that. Share this, like it, and I will see you next week back here on the Sean Spicer Show. Have a great weekend. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.